Hey, what is up guys, and welcome back to another RB and hardware video. And in today's video we're going to build a budget 1080 and 1440p gaming PC as cheap as possible. I'm gonna run you guys through the entire building process from start to finish, and then we're gonna look at gaming benchmarks in 21 of some of today's most popular games. Let's kick things off with the CPU, RAM, motherboard as well as storage. Now the CPU pick for today's build is the Ryzen 5 3600 with CPU gaming performance right between the 10400F from Intel and AMD's recently released Zen 3 based Ryzen 5 5600G APU. The 3600 is a brilliant 6-core CPU that is good enough even to be paired up with a mid to high-end GPU such as the 3060, the 3070, as well as the RX Radeon 6700 and the 6800 GPUs. Now coming in at $200, right now it sits right next to the 1100 400F, which performs fairly similar. But yeah, with all that being said, right now the 3600 can be a bit tricky to find in stock, and therefore I do want to shed some light on the first gen Ryzen 5 1600AF as a potential option and a go-to as well. The 1600AF is practically a rebranded Ryzen 5 2600 and performs only about 10% worse than the 3600 at $50 less, so I would consider this as an option if you cannot find the 3600 in stock. To install this CPU, we also gonna need a motherboard, coming in at just $60 to around $70. Gigabyte has done a terrific job here putting together a quality budget motherboard with dual channel 4-slot RAM support, plenty of USB ports, as well as decent VRM and heatsink. This motherboard is a no-brainer for any budget gaming PC builds. So you want to match up the triangle located at the left side corner with the triangle or circle on the motherboard. Lift up the lever, then line up the triangles, and then gently place the CPU in its socket, just like so. Then lower the lever and the CPU is installed. Next up then, let's go ahead and unbox the CPU cooler. Now to get away as cheaply as possible, I'm picking the included stock cooler for today's PC build, allowing us to spend more money on the graphics card that we're gonna look at in just a second. Now as we can see, our system has no problem keeping our CPU cool and quiet, avoiding thermal throttling to kick in, which yeah, we definitely don't want. And with AMD's included stock cooler, we certainly don't have to worry about that. Anyway guys, the cooler installment is super simple. Just a few takeaways here. Make sure that the AMD logo is facing the I/O and make sure that the 4 screws line up with the screw holes, and then carefully tighten the cooler down in a pattern something like so. With that done, now we can go ahead and proceed to the memory. For today's build, we're gonna use this. This is the Corsair Vengeance LPX 16GB kit, and this kit currently sits around $80 to $70. Now, if you wanna save a few dollars here guys, Amazon right now has a flash sale going on a similar kit with similar specifications that will work equally as good. And this can be yours for just $65, and I have it linked up down below for you guys. Following that, we have the SSD, or rather the M.2, coming in at $60. This 500GB unit from Kingston is worth every penny when compared to any traditional SSD, and trust me guys, if you are tired of long-lasting loading screens, a M.2 such as this one from Kingston will simply fix that for you. The M.2 easily slides into its socket with a sort of a 45-degree angle and will be fastened using the pre-installed M.2 screw. Now the case we're working with for today's build is a chassis from Colink called Citadel Mesh. Now this is a micro ATX chassis, so slightly smaller than normal size enclosures, but with the same cooling performance and set of features as you'd expect for any case out there. So that is all bells and whistles, but yeah, one drawback with the Citadel is that it can be quite tricky to find, especially if you're located in the US and Canada. And in that case, I recommend having a look at the Cooler Master MB320, which I recently featured in my top 3 best budget cases in 2021. Now both cases are very similar in terms of build quality, RGB functionality and cooling performance, as well as pricing. I do think that the Cooler Master is a little bit cheaper, coming in at around $50 to $60, but regardless, yeah, both cases are great and you find those linked up down below. Now before we go ahead and install the motherboard, guys, you don't want to forget the motherboard IO shield. We find this inside the motherboard box and it goes in from the back of the case with these 3 circular cutouts at the bottom, and then we can go ahead and secure the motherboard with the screws that comes provided by Colink or Cooler Master. Grab the power supply, slide it into its slot with the fan facing downwards and secure it. Now I'm not gonna go over the cabling and wiring in today's video, and if you're interested, you can simply watch any of my previous videos for exact details, how you should go about setting everything up. Anyway, let's move on to the graphics card. Now this is the GeForce GTX 1660 Super, which is a GPU mainly built for 1080p at very high details, but yeah, thanks to 6GB of G6 memory, it can definitely do 1440p pretty alright as well. I recommend that you drop the settings just a tad bit if you're gonna go for 1440p. We're gonna look at the performance in great detail in just a second, but as can be seen, Alien Fireteam Elite runs perfectly fine at full HD and at 1440p at medium settings. Now because of the ongoing GPU shortage, the 1660 Super can be quite hard to find in stock. And if you're unable to find one, I do recommend having an eye on the base 1660 variant as well. Now here, guys, is Call of Duty Warzone, and on the left side we find gameplay running on the base 1660 model, and on the right side we find the same system but with the addition of a GTX 1660 Super. Now as can be seen, quite similar in terms of performance, but the 1660 variant is a tad bit faster in the end of the day. Let's also address the pricing. Now, a lot of you guys probably already know this, but graphics cards have been very hard to get a hold of, and the prices are basically through the roof. Now, both the 1660 Super and the 1660 usually sells for about $220 to $230, but right now they go for about $360 to $400 and even $500, which is quite a price increase to say the least. Right now we aren't 100% sure when prices are gonna go back to normal again, but yeah, for the time being at least, the 1660 and the 1660 Super are one of the best price to performance GPUs you can get a hold of, at least on the retail market. If you want to get away cheaper, I recommend having a look at the used market for a 1060, a Radeon RX 580 or a GTX 970. Other alternatives can be to pull the trigger on an APU with the built-in graphics as a stopgap until prices are back to normal again. But yeah, right now it is kind of a mess to build a gaming PC, to say the least. Anyway, if we take a look at the gaming benchmarks, running 21 of some of the most popular games shows that the 1660 Super is able to provide us with smooth frame rate in most of the games tested. 1080p at high settings is what I would recommend, and for 1440p, medium to high settings is what you should aim for. For example, running Call of Duty Warzone, we're able to enjoy 91 FPS on average, Newly released Alien Fireteam Elite runs fantastic with an average of 88 FPS, and in days gone we saw almost 93 FPS in 1080p and 71 FPS at 1440. Now here guys is what the final part list is looking like. You should be able to pick up all parts new for around $830 for the B450 and the Ryzen 5 1600 AF combo. If you opt for the 1660 Super, you're looking at a total of about $949. And that assumes a $489 price tag for the GTX 1660 Super. Now this video guys took a lot of time to complete, so please leave a like or a dislike if you enjoyed the video, and make sure to subscribe to never miss any of my future gaming PC builds. Thank you so much for watching.